Okay, welcome to the Spring 2025 information session for our competitive application process. Let's start off with just a couple of terms that you may see during the presentation as well as on our website. So we refer to our whole annual grant making process, application process, with the word process. Now, this means that includes the fall process we finished last fall for funding at the top of 2025, as well as this cycle, this spring opening of application review for funding for the second half of the year. Because we are on a calendar fiscal year and our funding is available as of January 1st, we start in the fall and we continue in the spring, and that's considered the annual process. A cycle refers to the specific call for applications. So we are going into the spring cycle right now. So I want to stress to everyone, particularly those who may be new to us, we are constantly assessing our grant making and our call for applications. We make little changes here and there. Sometimes we make big changes. Right now, we do 2 calls for applications annually. And within those calls for applications, right now, we are focused on 2 main applications. One is what we consider our general funding request. That's operations, projects, and programs, and it's across all of our focus areas and for almost all of our field of interest funds. We'll get to those in a few minutes. The other special project that we have an application call for are special projects for our Janvrin fund, and we will also touch on what the criteria are for those. As a reminder, we may change things periodically. We try to do it at the beginning of a whole process instead of a cycle, but sometimes we have to make changes within cycles. Funding, the fall application has funding released in the first quarter of a new calendar year, and this cycle that we're headed into will be funding released third quarter of this year. I always start with what we will not fund. This is very important because there are specific things we will not consider applications for. And if I have it right at the outset, it gets it right up front, and hopefully will answer any questions that someone might have if they had been thinking about one of these things. This one I will cover quite in depth. So we cannot and do not make grants directly to individuals, nor do we accept applications requesting funds that will then turn around and be re-granted through another organization's application process to organizations within the community. So in other words, if you are an organization and you raise money through donations and then you run your own application process for organizations, our funding cannot be used for that re-granting. We do not support annual fundraising campaigns or event sponsorships through this process. We are very open, transparent, and inclusive, and we do require that any organization that submits an application have those same requirements in their constitution, bylaws, or practices. We do not consider applications for capital improvements or building projects because those tend to be very large projects, meaning the cost of them is large, and it's considered part of your capital improvement budget. You cannot use grant awards to recoup lost revenue, which occurred during a previous calendar year, or even losses incurred prior to this current application cycle. So if your fundraising is already way below what you had estimated and you've incurred expenses in the first half of the year and you're hoping to find a grant to back pay those expenses, we will not consider an application for that. We also will not consider applications for programs or materials that would normally be included in a regular operating budget for a municipal agency or a government agency or a school. So if it's regular curriculum and it's materials that should be covered under the school's normal operating budget, we will not accept applications to support that. You cannot use our grant awards to pay debt, legal settlements, or repay any past SBA loans or COVID-related loans. We will not consider applications for political or partisan purposes, campaigns, or lobbying activities. We will not fund lobbying. We will consider applications for community education and outreach on advocacy, what it means to be a community advocate, what maybe an issue is that you are advocating for in the broader community, but we will not fund efforts to go to the Capitol and lobby or directly work with a legislator on a piece of legislation. We also, while we have had religious organizations submit applications, and we will consider them, they must be for non-religious purposes and open to the whole community, and cannot serve a strictly religious purpose. We will not fund applications that serve strictly religious purposes. We also will not accept applications for endowments, reserve funds, capital campaigns, or annual fund drives. Key points to keep in mind, this is the spring cycle. We will review applications throughout the spring. The deadline is April 1st, and then our committees begin to review them. They will make their recommendations to our board in June. Any organization that is awarded a grant, it must be for expenses incurred after July 1st. You cannot use spring grant awards to pay for expenses incurred prior to July 1st of this year. The maximum request on our general funding, which most of you will probably fall under if you do submit an application, is $5,000. For those organizations that are considering a request to the Janvrin Fund, we will get to that criteria. You must meet that specific criteria in order to submit that application. The Janvrin Fund will accept requests of up to a maximum of $15,000. I will stress this. Those that have been through our process before, you know this. I'm going to stress it again. We welcome you to the information session. We encourage you to keep in touch with us. We encourage you to keep us informed. We do utilize your applications throughout the year, regardless of their funding status. But there is no guarantee of funding because you attend the information session. While this continues to be a competitive process, and I can tell you, I think that this will be very competitive this cycle. And we do have a finite amount of money that we are able to release into grant awards in our community. And our goal is to support as many things as possible to ensure that our community is thriving and is strong. The needs are great. The available funds are finite, but we continue to share your information as well with our funding partners. We are this cycle continuing to table our 3-year on, 1-year off guideline. For those that are new to us, we used to have a requirement that if you received 3 consecutive competitive grant awards, you had to take a year off. During COVID, we tabled that. We have continued to table that. However, we are continuing to assess the impact of that on our process. There is a strong possibility that we will re-implement that in an upcoming process because we are assessing what the impact is on our grant making. So let's talk about the type of funding request that will be considered. So if you are a 501c3 nonprofit organization and you are located in Middlesex County, and the majority or the predominant impact and the predominant geographic footprint or total geographic footprint that you serve is 1 or more towns in Middlesex County, you may submit a general application for either general operating support or a specific program or project. General operating means that the funding, if it's awarded, could be utilized for services and programs, but it must be for work only in Middlesex County, and you must be primarily focused of working in Middlesex County. That must be your primary focus. I will also say if you are a newer nonprofit, meaning you have probably gotten your 501c3 status, say in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, you should connect with me. You should schedule a call, send me an email, because I want to know what your fundraising is and what your current sustainability level is, because we do consider younger nonprofits to look more at providing us a program or project specific application because it provides us an opportunity to get to know you. There's still no guarantee of funding, but you should have a conversation with me. If your 501c3 is located inside Middlesex County or outside Middlesex County, and you serve both Middlesex County and a much broader footprint, you may only submit an application for a specific program or project, not general operating. So you might have your office here in Middletown, but you may serve all of Middlesex County, half of Hartford County, a lot of New Haven County, and even into New London County. That is a program or project specific request. If your group is a coalition or a collaboration and you have a fiscal sponsor, or you are a municipal entity or a school district or a healthcare organization, you may only apply for a specific project or program. And it must be budget enhancing, not budget replacing. And school districts are limited. So if you are from a school district, and I have to go back to the list, you probably want to check in with me just to make sure, because we don't necessarily allow school districts to come in every single cycle. Sometimes it's just one. So you can always check in with me on that. Faith-based organizations, as I said, are more than welcome, regardless of where they are, to submit a project or program application as long as it does not require adherence to religious doctrine. Collaborations will also only apply for projects or programs. Okay, let's quickly talk about the general application process. Now, I'm not going to go through every single word for word from this point forward because you will get these slides. As a reminder, most of you will qualify for the general application. That is requests of up to 5,000. It could be, if you meet the criteria, it could be a general operating, or it could be a specific program or project. These are programs and services offered within Middlesex County. All of our application processes, regardless of what type of application, mean our programs, services, and nonprofits and organizations that are serving Middlesex County. That is our geographic footprint. It could be one town, or it could be several towns, or all 15 towns. It could be for technology and equipment. It could be for capacity building and organizational improvement. That's professional development. Could be for a specific program or project, or even training or technical assistance. We have a lot of areas, focus areas. As a community foundation, we care about all facets of the community. So you could be an organization that meets one or more of these many impact areas, and all of these we will consider applications for. We also have several field of interest funds. On our application, you don't pick the specific fund if you're coming through the general application that you would like to apply to, but depending on the demographics and what is in your narrative, we may provide your application to one of these field of interest fund committees as well as our general committee, because our field of interest committees really are interested in the work that you're doing and they want to support it. We have a fund specifically focused on the needs and services provided to animals and education programs about animals and helping animals and their human friends. We do have a fund that's interested in programs and services for at-risk boys and young men. One of our newest funds to join our competitive process is the Deep River Cares Fund. They're very interested in nonprofits that are specifically doing work in Deep River. The Cajun Coley Fund for Conservation and Stewardship focuses on the Middletown and adjacent Northern County areas for conservation, beautification, and environmental education. Killingworth Community Fund is very interested in programs and services directed at the town of Killingworth. Our Sarah A. Rosenbaum Fund for Women and Girls is very, very interested. This committee really wants to know about programs and projects specifically directed at empowering women and girls and individuals who identify as female to be self-reliant to and to reach their potential. This could be everything from financial education. It could be for young girls. It could be for mentoring women. It could be financial and community engagement for senior women. It could be basic necessities. It could be ways of escaping domestic violence and creating a safe and stable future for oneself. They're very interested in all of those types of programs. And finally, the St. Luke's Home Fund was established by St. Luke's Home when they dissolved, and it continues to support programs and services for seniors and veterans. Janvrin Fund is a very specific fund with a very specific mission that was established here several years ago. This fund was established to preserve, protect, and steward land, waterways, and wildlife habitats for the benefit of Middlesex County's ecosystem, habitats for birds and other wildlife, and the well-being and enjoyment of those stewarded areas by our residents. This fund is interested, it's for special projects and programs specifically. It's very interested in any that directly impact Middlesex County in one or any of our 15 towns. It may touch communities outside of our footprint, but the main focus must be Middlesex County. These grants are not restricted to solely traditional, quote unquote, traditional environmental organizations. These could be organizations of all types that may have and may apply for ideas that specifically tie to this fund's mission. Funding requests will be considered up to 15,000, and applications must leverage not only the organization's own funding, but other funding sources. These are not land acquisition applications for anyone that might be involved in land acquisition. At this time, we are not accepting land acquisition applications. So really quickly, the way to think about what the Janvrin Fund is interested in is we're looking at new ways of thinking about engaging our community in our environment. So they can be very out of the box. They could offer opportunities, engagement, and access in new ways. One goal is to engage youth in environmental education that will help develop the next generation of stewards. It also promotes partnership and fosters equitable conservation and stewardship. And we have a definition of equitable conservation and stewardship in the PowerPoint that you'll receive. We welcome applications to do any number of these, which are collaborative, regional. We're very interested in solution-oriented approaches for this fund and for environmental stewardship, conservation, and wildlife habitats. And we will consider existing programs and new initiatives. However, people ask us this all the time. Does this mean that we would not consider a more traditional conservation or stewardship program? Not at all. If you are an organization, an environmental organization, and you do more traditional conservation, stewardship, or education programs, you are welcome to apply. We just want to make sure that some groups that are creating new and fascinating partnerships and thinking outside the box, if they meet the criteria, we will consider those as well. If you hover over nonprofits, you get this drop-down menu, and under grants programs is the program overview page. But then there's a page specifically for the general funding application and a page specifically for the Janvrin Fund application. On each of those is all of the information, like the FAQs, an overview of the application itself, as well as a link to the application. So that's where you find those. Be sure to check those out. And if you have any problems or any questions, let me know. Okay, so both applications, they're on each of the page, the applications are almost identical as far as the questions they ask. So that's why I'm just going to do one big thing about what we look for. We ask two main questions, narrative questions on our application. We ask what the need is, And then we ask about what you do for sustainability and assessment. Be specific in your narrative. I cannot stress this enough. While we may have slightly larger character count maximums to ensure that you have sufficient room to respond to the questions, you are not, and I will repeat this, you are not required to use every character available. Please don't feel that you need to fill up the space just because there's space to fill. I will also encourage you, in fact, I will plead with you to not write your narrative as one single long paragraph. And you will probably all find this amusing, but I will tell you, one year I actually had someone submit their narrative as one single long paragraph, and I think they came close to using the total character count. The grants committees couldn't read it because there was just so much information. It's great big blocks of text. So you can use paragraphs. You do not need to use all the characters. What's more important is that you are specific in your narrative. What is the need? How do you know it's a need? How are you going to address the need? What are the steps that are involved? What do you do? What are the outcomes that you're looking for? What is the timeline? Think about those questions. Those are all the questions that you should be answering in your narrative, right? What you have to remember is our committees are made up of volunteers who really care about what you're doing. They're very interested in what you're doing, but they're not necessarily professionals in your industry or your area of expertise. So it's a part education and it's a part information. So think about that in your approach to your narrative. What is the need you are addressing? Okay. We maintain our open approach to all of our focus areas because we believe as strongly in recreation and arts and culture and heritage as we do in social and public benefit services, human services, health needs, basic necessities. All of that is necessary to make a whole, healthy, happy, thriving community, right? So we're open to all of it. We're very interested in what's going on. We are very interested in critical needs. We know a lot of things are going on right now. We know that there are a lot of critical needs currently and more arising each and every day. We're also always aware of and looking at what the sustainability piece is. So not only do we want to know how do you assess the outcome of the work that you're doing, but what steps are you doing to ensure your sustainability? Your ability to continue paying for your programs and your services. If you are seeding or piloting a new program, ask yourself these questions before you start your application. Are you far enough into the development, the brainstorming process to be able to answer the timeline question, the purpose question, the goals and outcome question, and how you will encourage and get people to actually attend your new program that you're hoping to launch? If you cannot answer those questions, if you haven't really thought those pieces through, then you're probably not ready to actually seek funding for that program yet. It means it needs a little bit more in the development process. You will also need to answer the question, if you seed this program and it is successful, what are your plans to ensure its continued success, its continued sustainability? Let's talk about the required budget document or documents, depending on the type of application that you submit. Not every applicant, regardless of which application you use, is required to submit a copy of your board-approved operations budget. This budget should show your current year budget, estimated expenses, and estimated revenues. That should be more than one line that says estimated revenues and one line that says estimated expenses. That's not sufficient, and that's not an operating budget. What we want to see, we don't need minutia down to the what you're paying for flyers or what you're paying for pencils, but what we want to do is see your revenue budget of what you're doing through grant applications, through your regular fundraising, through any special events that you're doing, and then in the expenses, your salary lines or your marketing expenses or your program expenses, if you pay rent, any of those. So your big line items. So every organization is required to submit that budget. Organizations that are submitting an application for a specific program or project must also submit the CFMC project budget form. This is on both pages, Janvern and General. You download it, it's in a Word document. You complete it and you're looking at just the expense and revenue costs specifically for the program or project you are applying for. And on the expenses, it should be somewhat detailed. It should not just say program expenses. If it says just program expenses, I'm going to send it back to you and say insufficient, please revise. On the revenue, you don't have to put down every individual donor's name if you have individual independent donors, but if you do fundraising, if you're submitting another grant, if you're going to, have a special appeal, there's a section in the revenue. And I will stress this. This is for many of you, this is a new requirement. We will no longer consider applications where we are the sole funder. Some of the funding can come from your operations budget. Because you've been fundraising and you've raised money. What we're talking about here is in the past, we have received applications where the total cost of the project is $5,000 and the total grant request is $5,000. That's a sole funding situation, meaning no one else is putting in any funding or no other funding is being sought. I will also stress what we have not done is we have not put a percentage on this. So right now, we're not saying you have to have, we'll do, it has to be 75% or 24. We're not doing that yet because we are trying to get a sense of because different requests, some are very large budgets and we're a small portion, others are smaller. Okay, so what if our program costs 4,000 and we're asking for 4,000, but we have a bunch of volunteers that are willing to just volunteer their time to do all the work. We love in-kind and volunteer work. We thrive on our volunteers. We stress volunteers are the best and you should laud them and celebrate them as much as possible. But if the only other funding you have is solely in kind because it's being given, it's volunteer time being given, or someone's giving you the space, that's still a sole funding issue. That's not. So let's do some tips really quickly, particularly for those that might be new, but this is a good reminder for those of you that have been through this process before, right? Acronyms. We don't mind acronyms. Acronyms are fine. However, if you're going to use acronyms, the very first time you use the acronym, you should also give the whole phrase or name or whatever it is that the acronym stands for. Remember, our reviewers are volunteers. They don't necessarily come from your industry. They don't necessarily know what you know. So if you're going to use an acronym, please, the very first time you use it, provide what that acronym means. And then you can use the acronym throughout. Narrative. Once again, please stay on point. Please do not take a left-hand turn onto the next street and go off on a tangent. Think about what you're asking for and why it's important and explain that to the reviewer. They're very interested in knowing what you know and what you see as your needs, and they need that information to be able to understand your requests. Discuss your impact. If you reference the number of people you serve, be specific about that service. Who is that population? What is that number? How are you measuring that? Just don't say we serve lots of people. Well, what is lots of people? Is it 10? Is it 20? Is it 150? Who are they? Where are they? How are you measuring that? And if you're offering a community outreach program, please don't forget to tell us how you notify the community, how you engage the community, and how you get them to attend. That's part of what your project is. Let's talk about the demographic sections really quickly. Of those that are familiar with our application, you'll get to a place where you're going to do some check boxes. Those are the demographic sections. Number one asks which towns you serve. So if you check off all 15 towns, but your narrative, excuse me, only mentions 4 towns that this project specifically is about, then that doesn't match. The demographic question is about what you're asking your application. So if your program is reaching 4 towns in our footprint, those are the only 4 towns you should be checking off in the demographics section. If you don't just pick all the towns because you think the more towns you pick, the better off your application is. It does not work that way. The total number served is not the census. I'm going to say that again. Not the census. Okay. Total number served is how many do you think you are going to serve through what you're applying for? Are you doing a community outreach engagement program? How many are you expecting? If you provide a basic needs support group, on average, how many do you serve? That's the total number served. Periodically in the past, we've had people tell us they serve all of Middlesex County, and then they give us the total population of Middlesex County. And I will challenge you to tell me how you know you serve 165,000 people. Please think about how you do your data and your numbers. If you only serve 4 people, that's okay. 4 people means that you're making a direct impact on the lives of 4 people. That's okay. Don't worry about that. So we really want you to think about how you're telling us about the number that you serve. And proofread, proofread, proofread. Proofread, proofread, proofread. I can't stress this enough, particularly the biggest error we see over and over and over again. Page 1 of the application, it will ask, what is the total project cost? Then I go to the budget summary and I look at what the total project cost on the project summary, on the budget summary, or on your organization budget is. They don't match. So which one is it? So please make sure that you're proofreading across all of your documents. So I get this question a lot. Let me be very clear. Everyone always says, well, can our organization submit multiple applications? We've got lots of different departments and lots of things. No, one application per organization. Even if you have lots of division arms, lots of things going on, it's one application per organization. As I said before, these are very competitive processes. When we go through them each year, each cycle is very competitive. There's a finite amount of funding, and we are trying to do as much impact in as many ways as possible, so that we do ask you to do one application. We do get questions that where 2 nonprofits or a nonprofit and a school might be collaborating on something together, who submits the application? Or can each organization submit an application? So if you're on a collaborative with 2 or more nonprofits, one nonprofit is going to be the lead nonprofit, and they're the ones that will submit the application. They submit the application on behalf of all the partners and collaborators. If you are part of that collaboration, but you're also considering an application for your own organization, it in no way, shape, or form can have any connection with the collaboration. That's called double dipping. We do not allow for that. So if your organization is thinking of something completely separate, it must be completely separate. However, I will tell you that we will monitor the number of applications and the needs, et cetera. And when we do see a collaborative, we do also weigh any standalone applications in general, just in the overall total number, to make sure that we are trying to do as much breadth across our 15 towns as possible. Partnerships and collaborations, whether it's 2 nonprofits or a nonprofit in a school, there are certain questions on there. So only one group becomes the applicant, but you will be required to submit, if you're not the applicant, the lead organization or the lead, and this is for a school as well, you are required to submit letters of support for the one that is applying that state very clearly you understand the program, you're committed to it, and what you're providing. Same thing for schools. If you're a nonprofit doing a direct partnership to bring education into a school to assist the school in enhancing its curriculum, You will need a letter from the school superintendent and the principal of the school where you will be bringing your program in, clearly stating how your program supports and enhances their curriculum rather than replaces things that should be regularly planned for the normal classroom. Please review the FAQ. If people ask me if they can, if there's an outline for the application so they can get a sense, yes, there is. It's a PDF. You can download it. It'll tell you all the questions that are asked on there. Please look at all of that before you do your submission. Applications must be completed on our website. You cannot print the pages and fill them out by hand. You have to complete it on our website and you must submit it on our website. Your required documents must be uploaded in a PDF. I'm going to stress this again. When you upload your operations budget and the budget summary form, if you complete that, your list of board members and your IRS determination letter, it must be uploaded as PDFs. Our site will not accept any other, they won't accept Word, Excel, JPEG, whatever, only PDF for this application. If you have problems uploading them, please send me an email. Don't fight with the application. I need to know you're having a problem. You're probably not the only one having a problem, and I can usually fix it or do a workaround for you. I like to know if there are issues going on. There is no print preview because of the way the form is set up, but you can page forward and backward to check your application while it's in process. There is, which I'll show you in just a sec, there is a way to save and finish later. So just as a reminder, this slide reminds you of what is required to be uploaded with your application. Please make sure that you remember all of your required documents. Incomplete applications will not be reviewed. Please ensure they're complete prior to submitting them. And if the application does not meet our criteria, we will not review it either. I'll be in touch with you if that happens. And once again, if we're the sole funder, we will not consider your application. You will receive a copy of the application via email after you click submit. However, if you don't receive it, please let me know and we'll make sure to forward that on. Okay. Here is the biggest tip of the day. If you don't listen to anything else, you should listen to this. And there are people online on the webinar right now, all nodding their head because we go through this every cycle. When you use the save and finish later option, which I encourage you to do, because I encourage you to draft the narrative of your application in a Word document on your PC or tablet while you're working all the details out and copy and paste it into the application when you're ready. But as you're working on it, you can save and finish later. When you click save and finish later, this screen, this grant application request for application with this nice orange URL is going to pop up on your screen. You're going to do two things. The very first thing you're going to do is you are going to copy this URL that is tied directly to your application that you're completing, and you're going to save it in that Word document where you're drafting your narratives. And then the second thing you're going to do is you're going to enter your email address so it will send you the link. And you're asking me, for those that are new, well, why would I copy the URL if it's going to send me the URL and a link? Because sometimes quarantines, filters, and the internet cause your email to disappear and you never get that link. And when you don't copy this link so that you have it and you don't get the email, you send me an email and say, there, I can't get to my email, my application. Can you send me the link? And unfortunately, I can't, because your application prior to submission is being stored on a temporary server. I can't get to it. I don't see it. I don't have any way to access it. This URL will be the same URL that's assigned to your application until you click submit. But until you click submit, I have no way to see it and no way to get you that link. So please be sure to copy this, put it in that narrative document, that Word document you're using to draft your narrative. You'll always have it and you'll never panic, right? Please. Okay. If you have a prior grant award from a previous cycle, and I forgot to change the date again. My apologies. I will fix this. That date should be April 14th, not September 30th. I apologize for that. Your evaluations or interim evaluations from a previous grant award are due or April 14th, which means if you're not sure if you owe me an evaluation, please send me or Mary an email and we are happy to check for you. Okay. We always need photos, stories from your recent grants because we're in the process of putting our report to the community together. We love to tell your stories. So please get us any photos, quotes, or short stories about your impact so we can use them in our e-news and in our community report, which is being drafted right now. March 4th, we opened. Your applications are due at 4 p.m. on April 1st. If you're new to this, let me be very clear. If your application comes in at 4:02 on April 1st, and our website times the moment you click submit, we check. We cannot monitor it. 4 p.m. is the deadline, not midnight, not 8 p.m., 4 p.m. You would be surprised at how many applications in the past I have received at 11:59, the night of the day that they were due. So please mark your calendars, 4 p.m. April 1st. During April and May, our committees will review them. Recommendations will be presented to our board of directors in June. And during the last 2 weeks of June, we'll notify you of final decisions. And your grant agreements will go out in early July, and then we'll release the funding. We will host a PR and evaluation workshop in late July for the grantees of this cycle.
Can you please say a little bit more about the prohibition against lobbying efforts? What exactly does that mean, and what do you consider lobbying, please?
So we consider applications for advocacy, which means education programs for the community. But if an organization is specifically putting together a program or project to go to Hartford and lobby directly with the legislative body, with individual representatives and senators, we have to be very careful as a community foundation. There's a very fine line about advocacy and public education and raising awareness on issues, and the line that people cross when they're actively lobbying legislators on a specific issue or a piece of legislation. So we ask our nonprofits to focus more on community advocacy and raising awareness and education, not lobbying or direct advocacy with representatives at the Capitol, because it really brings into line that very fine line between the two for us. Rosalind's asked a question in the chat. Can other funders be in-kind funders? We appreciate that there is a lot of in-kind support, and our budget summary form does ask for in-kind support. However, on the funding, the physical money, the money that funds a program, if the physical costs for a program are 5,000 and you're asking us for 5,000, that is a sole funder situation, and those applications we will not consider.
So my question is, if we're seeking funding for a larger program, and we're seeking funding for to fund a small portion of that, and let's say the program is extended throughout the summer, so prior to July 1st, but there'll be the expenses covered by the grant post July 1st, but it's all sort of part of the same program. Is that okay? Is that okay? Two, is there a way that we should sort of delineate that in the grant application process?
You're asking, your program could be going from April to November, you have ongoing fundraising towards being able to pay the expenses. Yes, as long as that you did not incur the majority of the expenses at the top half and you're still struggling to find the money to pay it, we recognize that some programs have very long time spans. It's so when we say expenses not incurred before July 1st, our expectation is you may be ongoing fundraising, but it's not that you incurred all the expenses at the top of the year and you're spending the year trying to find ways to back pay into those expenses.
Thanks very much. And I apologize. I feel like I ask this question every single year, but I can't remember the answer. If we're applying for general operating funding, can we submit our approved operations budget in our format, or do we have to put it into the project budget
No,
form?
that's a really good question, Carla, and I'm so glad you asked it because it is one, and you should just keep asking that question because others may have the same one. So if you are requesting general operating support, you can submit your operations budget as long as it shows it's not just total revenue and total expenses. We want to see what the estimated expense lines. It's not every single thing, but do you have an expense line for salaries? Do you have it for office supplies? Do you have it for marketing? Do you have it for events? So that type of thing. Your organization's budget should have some detail in it, as well as could have like big revenue things. And I want to stress whenever we ask about revenue, particularly, you can say individual donors. If you fundraise with individual donors to support your program, that's terrific. And you can just say individual donors and the estimated amount. We're not looking for individual donor names. I'll be frank, we're really nosy and we love it to know what other foundations or big funders you might be submitting grant applications to. But if you have your next door neighbor as a donor and your friend down the street and 15 other people from town, you don't have to list out their names. You just say individual donors. But for those that are doing general operating support, it's just the organization's board approved budget. It's not also our project budget summary because you'd just be duplicating efforts. If it's easier for you to fill out our project summary form because you think it's an easier way to show what your organization's operating budget is, you're more than welcome to do that, but you don't have to recreate it in our form. Christopher has a social media impact, good for you, of over 100,000 social media followers. That's phenomenal. Congratulations. That is really great. If you are submitting an application, though, for a program or project that you're doing at your organization, when we talk about impact, that's what we're looking at. We want to know how many people you are actually involved in or engaged with or are touching more. The social media touch is a great question. You have a lot of followers, and that's phenomenal. But those are really followers in the social media world, and they may see your post, but you're not necessarily engaging with them on a like a one-on-one or a direct impact. So when you're writing your applications and you're considering your impact question, particularly those that may have broader footprints or broader reach, really, who are you really engaging with? What's a consistent concept of those people that maybe are supporting you, coming to your events, maybe making contributions? What's that connection to your community? Christopher, the second half, if you're thinking about seeding a new program, how many people could you accommodate in that program? That would be your potential impact in that space. So,
does that mean one application for general funding and Janvrin, or could we do two separate applications?
Thank you for asking that question, Alan. That's a great question. The answer is one application. Choose either general or Janvrin. And once again, this is not you, but it's a good time for me to do a reminder. Everybody sees the dollar maximum on Janvrin and thinks, ooh, I'm going to apply for that one. Only if you meet that criteria. That is very narrow, specific criteria. But it's a very good question. No, you cannot submit. If you qualified for both, you can't submit one through each process. This is our whole cycle, and we just happen to have two opportunities within a single cycle. So it's one application regardless of type. Priscilla's asking me a question about applying in the spring cycle if your organization received a fall cycle grant. If you received a grant award in our fall cycle this year, meaning that you are just now receiving your grant checks and you signed your grant agreements in January, you are not eligible to apply in this cycle because our funding year, the actual fiscal year funding year, is 2025. So our fall cycle and our spring cycle is all of funding released in our calendar year 2025, and you can only receive one competitive award with actual money check from us in the calendar year. So it's either fall cycle, you've already received one, you are not eligible, or you can apply in the spring. Here's our contact information. If you have any questions, please send an email to either Mary or to me or to both of us. We're happy to answer your questions. If you have specific questions on a specific project you're thinking about, send me an email. I'll schedule a call with you. Happy to do that. Thank you all for joining today.